Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and we are back today with the Halo M90 shotgun. If you haven't seen the video that I did on Christmas, recounting all of the fake history of this gun based on the Halo lore and universe, you should definitely check that one out. But if you did see that, and you're mechanically inclined and interested in guns, you might wonder, how exactly does this thing work? Because this is fundamentally based on a left-handed 870 Wingmaster that has been flipped upside down so that it now loads from the top and ejects out the right on the bottom. But that means the trigger is supposed to be up here, and now the trigger is somehow down here. When I did my previous video on this gun, I talked about things like the magnetic dampening system for recoil and the history of fake companies from the video game universe that built it. I didn't actually touch on how the gun really works, and today that's what we're going to do. So let's dive in and take this thing apart. All right, let's start with a quick demo here. We are unloaded. Nothing in the tube, nothing in the chamber. Close it, pull the trigger. It's a fairly long, straight trigger press. That fires the gun, which then unlocks it to fire again. So how does that work? Well, the actual trigger mechanically is up here. In fact, that's one of the two pins holding the trigger group into the 870. Now, what we have here is a pistol grip, a trigger guard, a cover plate on this side, a cover plate on the top, another cover plate on this side, and then we have a block back here that's used to attach the Magpul stock. So we're going to ignore the stock for the moment. I'm going to start by taking off the pistol grip so that we can see what's really going on in there. That's nice and easy. It's just a regular screw, regular pistol grip. And the mounting block here is a standard AR configuration, so it'll take any pistol grip that you want. Now, to take off the trigger guard, we only have to take out this screw, loosen that up just enough that it disengages from the opposite side. We can pull that out and slide the trigger guard off. The other two screws here are just to hold this together, because this is made out of the same sheet material as, same thin plate as these side plates. All right, now we're getting closer. Now we can see our trigger in here. Next thing we need to do is take off this side plate. For what it's worth, this side plate doesn't actually cover anything relevant. It's just there to take up the space between the shotgun receiver and the buttstock adapter. So we'll stick to this side. We've got two flatheads and three little socket screws. All right, loosened those all up. It's important to note that these pieces are all aluminum. Of course, the screws are steel, so you do want to be careful. You don't want to over tighten anything, or you could strip out the aluminum threading. Now, let's see, let's take, there we go. We can take this side plate off, just leave all the screws in there. You can see they're coming through there on the bottom. And now we've got this bar, which sits in there, and a spring that goes with it. So this spring sits in this cavity, and it's going to interact with this pin on one of our trigger components. And the last piece to take off, before I can show you the whole function, is going to be this top plate. So we'll pull that little screw out. This front screw here, actually, we're not going to pull all the way out. We only need to loosen it a little bit. That should be enough, because that front screw, all we need to do is disconnect this whole assembly from the receiver. So there we go. And that comes off. Now there's a bunch of grease in here, which is important, just so everything slides freely. But now you can actually see what's going on. First thing I'm going to do here is just pop this guy out. It's just kind of held in place by grease tension, because with this plate out, now you can see the original trigger of the gun. It's this guy right here. When I push this down, it'll fire. Just like that. So the whole firing, the sear, the hammer, everything necessary to actually fire the shell is located inside the original. It's the 870 fire control system. It's held in place by these two pins, and this is the sear that the original trigger would have acted on. So what needs to happen to make this work is to get that trigger to act on that sear, and the way that that was done was with a series of interlocking or interlinked camming surfaces. So this guy goes up here, just like that, and we've got a pin here to ensure that the trigger itself travels smoothly. So we've got a pair of matching surfaces right here, so that when I push the trigger back, it's going to push this connecting piece upward, like that. Total length of trigger press is actually determined by the pistol grip block right there. Now, you remember perhaps this piece that we took out. Well, this is held in place by the cover plate, and that spring is actually compressing against that pin. It sticks up like so. So this is actually your trigger return spring, because that guy is pushing downward on that pin. So when you let go of the trigger, that spring is going to push it back down and reset the trigger. Now, the next step of this is another pair of connecting surfaces right here, so that when this lower connecting bar goes up, it's going to pull this top piece backwards. Now, this one's a little harder to replicate with all the parts apart, because normally that top plate is holding this very solidly down to make sure that it remains in contact with the trigger. See, there's an open slot here that's going to press on the trigger when this goes back. So when this guy goes back, just like that, it fires. There is also a somewhat difficult to see return spring on this piece as well, and it's right back inside there. So if I pull this out again, you can see it right there. It's mounted inside the stock adapter block here. It's a fairly heavy, fairly short spring, and it's just there to ensure that this piece always resets forward at the same time as the other two pieces are resetting. Note that there is also a screw set right here, and that is basically a forward over travel stop for this piece. So it can't go any farther forward than that, and anytime it starts to move back, that spring is always trying to return it forward. So this is the tricky bit, because this is a very sensitive sear, but you have a lot of movement in the trigger itself, and you have to have a reliable transmission, essentially, of that movement onto a fairly touchy sear. So I think this is perhaps not the most elegant way that this could be done, but it is a way that ensures that it remains safe, because as far as I can tell, this is going to have a very difficult time moving. The spring here is heavy enough that this piece isn't going to move back and trip that sear unless you've actually pulled that trigger a fairly long distance. Now, the result is a fairly long, fairly heavy trigger pull, but it does appear to be a fairly reliable one. Now, it's important to note that this top cover is actually a critically important piece of the mechanism, because this top cover is what holds this, this top transfer bar, I suppose you could call it. That's what holds it firmly down on the actual sear. If this top cover is loose at all, this piece, when it moves backward, can actually pivot up like that, in which event it doesn't actually trip the sear, like so. You have to hold that down snugly so that rearward travel will, in fact, trip the sear. So that is today's lesson in video game future gunsmithing, I suppose. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.